Tony, Susan and Bob drove up to the band room in their Land Rover the following Wednesday for band practice. As they got 20 feet from the entrance, the security light came on outside the band room. Tony turned his steering wheel suddenly, swung them into the space, and screeched to a halt. Gravel was flying up, and he stopped. He looked at the others' cars. "Are we early, Sue?" Tony said. "No, the usual. Why?" "There are usually more people here by now." "Maybe there is a zombie invasion and everyone has been eaten," Bob said wickedly. "More like a pub invasion," replied Tony. They got out of the Land Rover. Tony opened the back of the Land Rover, and in amongst tools, a few old Coke cans and some oily rags, there were a few bags, full of different collections of items. A bag for the charity shop, a bag of cat litter, Sue's bag for band and others. "Get my bag for band, will you?" Sue asked. They each took out what they needed for the rehearsal. Tony picked up his trombone, Sue's bag, and Bob got his stick bag. Sue had bought some chocolate digestives and some fig biscuits for the biscuit barrel. Tony locked the car and went into the band room. The security light went off. Ernie was in his usual position behind the desk, counting money and filling in accounting books. "Hi, Ern. Where is everyone?" Susan asked. "Well, I'm not positive, but I think the 10-piece got food poisoning the other day." "Are they all off?" "Not heard from Liz yet, but there's still time. Or Diane and Sophie. Not heard from the Thompsons either." "I bet it was prawns," Tony said. "Sue eats them and is always lucky. But whenever I have them, I'm having conversations with the toilet pan all night. Anything that you have to pick the poo out of, I think you should avoid." "Nice. Tony's got the bag for the barrel," Sue said. Ernie took the bag from Tony and put his hand in it, taking out the contents. Metallic and long. He looked shocked, then dropped it on the table. "The bloody hell is that?" Sue rushed over and looked at the object on the table. She couldn't place it. Then it hit her, right between the eyes. "It's a spare part for my washing machine. Tony, you picked up the wrong bag," she said. Ernie sat down, mock clutching his heart. "Blow me! I thought it was a marital aid," he said. Sue burst out laughing. "I don't need any help in that way," Tony said. He walked towards the door to get the other bag. The door banged open, and Liz and Andy walked in. Liz looked white and weak. Her hair was stuck together in clumps, and she was wearing her jumper inside out. Andy was carrying both instrument cases. "Liz, you look terrible," Ernie said. "Thanks a bunch, Ern. Glad I made an effort now." "It's much appreciated, but if you have a bug, I would rather you be at home and not infect the others." "It's not a bug. Andy hasn't got it. I just don't fancy any food, and I feel shaky and want to sleep all the time." She drops herself into a chair near the counter and weakly starts to get her instrument out. "Maybe you are in the family way," says Ernie. "No," Andy and Liz replied together. "It's not that at all. It's since the weekend, the day after the party. I have been having such weird dreams too." "Did you eat prawns?" Tony asks knowledgeably. "No." "Pork?" asks Susan. Liz thinks hard and then says, "I had a vegetarian hot dog." "There's no pork in them, only ear holes and eyelashes. The same as real hot dogs," laughed Ernie. "Thanks. That's taken the queasiness off completely," Liz said as she rolled her eyes. "Why did you let her come in, Andy?" "She bloody insisted, didn't she? Said if she didn't come with me, she would drive herself here in her car after I'd left. So I had to bring her. This is Liz you are talking about, you know." Andy shook his head. "I see that would be difficult," Tony said, winking at Andy. "You probably just need a tonic, one with iron in it," Sue says. "Or an old-fashioned posset." "Oh, a posset. I fancy one of those," said Ernie. "What's one of them?" asked Andy. "If it will help Liz, we will get it." "Well, you take half a pint of milk in a pan, warm it, not boiling though," said Sue. "Or you'll cook the egg," shouted Lynn. as she came in from out of the music library. "What egg?" asked Liz. "OK, while you are warming the milk, you take an egg, beat it, stir in about a tablespoon of black treacle," Sue said. "Not golden syrup either, never," Ernie interrupted angrily, looking at Lynn. "If you don't have the ingredients, don't cobble it together, like someone I know. The black treacle is important. Then you add the warm milk to the egg and treacle combination, and stir it gently together, melting the treacle. Finally, you sprinkle a bit of nutmeg on the top." Sue smiled. "Not cinnamon. That is forbidden too." Ernie looked at Lynn, shaking his head. "I did all this one time, and you have never let me forget it, have you? It must have been 15 years ago now," Lynn said. "I can't forget it, Lynn. Anyway, Liz, take it to bed, drink it down, go to sleep. It fixes anything." "That sounds nice. I'll call and get something on the way home tonight. Thanks, Sue and Ernie. There's not many here tonight." "No, they are dropping like flies. Not heard from Sophie or Diane, or the Thompsons. Various tales about all the others, but they were all members of the 10-piece, so this food poisoning theory of mine might be right, even if that food wasn't prawns." They could hear a car engine outside. Tony looked out of the window as he was just beside it, getting his trombone out of its case. The security light came on, and he recognised the BMW 4x4. "It's Roger," he said, and drew his nose even further towards the window, straining his eyes to see through the darkness. "He's got Sophie with him." "Talk of the devil," Ernie said, grinning. Roger entered. A wealthy elderly man who was always well dressed and liked the finer things in life. Sophie was just behind him. They shut the door, and Sophie announced breezily, "Me mam's not coming. She's ill." "What's up with her?" Ernie asked. "I can guess that it's probably food poisoning." "No, Ernie, you're wrong as usual. It's a migraine." "Oh, fair enough. Cheeky madam," he thought. Sophie stood by the coat rack and started to take off her coat. She's been in her room with the curtains closed since the weekend. Not seen her go in the loo, so I think it's migraine. She's had them before. Liz got up wearily out of her seat and walked past Sophie. "Yeah, usually after every weekend. To be fair, Sophie, she was really drunk at the concert, and we all know she likes a good time," Liz said. "Piss off, Liz. I see you are looking gorgeous as usual," she snapped. "Didn't you ask what was wrong with her? Or ask if she wanted anything?" asked Sue. "I've been out with my mates most of the weekend, and I've looked in, but she looks asleep." "She could be dead as far as you know," Andy said. "Just leave it," Sophie snapped back. "Let's get on with the practice, everyone," Ernie said diplomatically. Everyone took their seats. Liz and Sophie, shooting daggers across the room at each other with their eyes. They had never been the best of friends. Ernie walked to the front to make his announcements. "Right, everyone. We have got a few absent after the other night's food poisoning or shenanigans. I wasn't there. I don't know. I have heard that the band played beautifully, and that's all I'm bothered about. Not heard of the Thompsons yet, which is unusual. I will keep you informed. We are practicing a few new carols tonight, amongst other things, for the Christmas concert with Friarmere Primary in December. Barry has got a few things out of the music library for us to go through, and those are in your music pads, courtesy of Fred. OK, over to Barry." "Right, band, get out Carol of the Bells," sighed Barry. Woody sat in his living room. The room was just lit by the light of the television. Even that got too bright at some points. The sound was off, and EastEnders was on. He wasn't watching Ian Beale in the cafe, though. He felt like he was falling into a bottomless pit. Desperate to eat, his stomach groaned, but he knew he couldn't eat or else he would be sick. He hated being ill. Plus, he was in a vile temper and didn't know why. His wife, Janet, wanted to stay at home and look after him, or make him soup, or tea, or put a blanket on him, but every word she said, even her presence in the room, made him want to kill her. Not just kill her, no, rip eviscerate, destroy her. He had never felt like this in his life, and never wanted to again. He loved Janet. Sometimes he felt lucid. He knew what he was feeling was only temporary and alien. Then 5 minutes later, he would want to embrace these feelings, still in anger and immense hunger again. He definitely wasn't going to go to work again tomorrow, or even to the shops. He didn't want to go out, didn't want to see anyone, didn't want Janet to come home. He was too afraid of her getting too close to him and what he might be capable of. Diane lay in her bed. The pillow was wet with cold sweat. She had felt dreadful the next morning after the party. She had a bad hangover. It seemed it happened less and less these days, but this was bad. She couldn't face food or water. It was lasting much longer than usual, but after many hours of tortured dreams and tortured wakefulness, she knew what would make her feel better: the hair of the dog that bit her. It crossed her mind for a split second that she was becoming an alcoholic, but then she discarded that notion with a snort. She had taken a bottle of wine from the party, and there was no one else in the room. Stephen had clumsily taken 2, and Diane thought she would blame him if questions were asked. She weakly reached into her bag and took out the bottle of wine. The corks had been removed to let the wine breathe, and a stopper had been inserted. As she lifted the stopper, the slightest scent of salvation came from the bottle. She shivered all over and took a sip. The effect was almost orgasmic. Each drop was like nectar, but she knew she could not drink a lot at a time. Tonight this tasted so rich, even thick. So she had another wonderful sip and put the cork back in the bottle. She felt so much better, but then had a sudden realization. Had Norman drugged them? Diane had experience in drugs and knew that she had been craving something that wasn't just alcohol and was withdrawing from it. That substance was in the bottle. She thought she cared, then realized she didn't. Then sleep finally came to take her. Keith felt like shit. He refused to stay at home, absolutely refused. He had always said he would go to work with 2 broken legs if he had to. He had been brought up by a strict father, an old-fashioned mother, and they had instilled in him that you attended school and work every day. Spare the rod, spoil the child. The adult Keith thought that weakness or illness were to be despised, and he was pompous, loud-mouthed and unpopular, tall and unattractive, with the kind of skin that told of many acne-plagued years. He was a heavy smoker, and recently had become quite hunched in the shoulders. At 53, he was a police constable, regretting he hadn't achieved a higher rank, one of many sources of his bitterness. He also wished he was a better musician, and had never been a father, so a child had never softened his approach to the young either. His wife, Yvonne, who he thought might turn into some kind of sex kitten, had ended up just like him, shrew-faced, bitter, childless, selfish. At least they had someone to talk to at night, as they had no other friends, apart from the people at Friarmere Band. There was no one he spoke to. The other officers avoided him, as he was a very negative energy. Life was tough enough in the police force, without some misery bringing everyone down. So, apart from all Keith's other natural and normal ways, there was an added blackness about him tonight. No, more than that, a need to inflict pain, misery on others that he had not experienced before. The rain and cold matched his mood. As he started through the streets, he was determined to suffer no fools gladly tonight. Maurice didn't feel too well, like indigestion, but a bit different. An acidic taste in his mouth, definitely, but a fierce hunger. A man of his age knew, though, if you have acid indigestion, you don't put more food in your belly for it to raise the acid levels further. He thought back to when he had had a last meal. Maybe it was when he had that leftover food from the party. Yes, that was it. Obviously too much pastry. Or perhaps it was on the turn. He couldn't quite remember when that meal was, though. Maurice remembered the following morning, feeling very unwell, and forcing himself to eat that food for strength. After all, he lived on his own, so if he got into a proper state, who would help him? He had to walk everywhere, even in the house with his stick. Immediately after that food, he had a good sleep, and woke up feeling quite refreshed. He felt like he might have a headache on its way, though, probably too much sleep, and he hadn't opened his curtains. Coming to think about it now, he hadn't opened them since the weekend. Tonight he had rung Ernie and said he couldn't blow his cornet with a load of acid at the back of his throat, and Ernie agreed. He thought for a while about fixing himself up. Now, did he have a couple of rogue antacid tablets in his medicine box? It was quite full of all his other medications, and he hadn't needed them for ages. Getting up, he moved slowly to the kitchen and opened the cupboard, containing his tablets, rummaging around for a minute in there. He wondered if he had thrown them out and had forgotten about it. Just when he had lost all hope, he saw the bent packet underneath an old tin of Fiery Jack rubbing ointment. Luckily, there were 2 tablets left. Popping them out of their blister pack onto the kitchen counter, the smell of mint was overpowering. He fumbled about with them on the table and wondered if this was such a good idea at all. The scent of mint made him more nauseous. Flaring his nostrils, he took deep breaths to try and not succumb. He waited a couple of minutes, deep breathing, but it wasn't going away. In a decision of all or nothing, taking the tablets in the palm of his hand, he threw them into his mouth and started to chew. Almost immediately, he began to heave, his gag reflex showing its immense strength by forcing him to disgorge his mouth's contents straight back up onto the counter. Oh, bloody hell, that's the end of that, he thought. Wiping his mess up with some snowman kitchen paper, he put the medicine box away, wondering what on earth to do next. Deciding it might just be best to take his mind off it, he walked back into his front room, switching on Radio 3 as he passed it. There might be some brass band music on. Sitting down, his hand touched his stick, his old friend for many years, which has been there for the whole time he was in the kitchen. It had been his old friend for years now, and he was usually unable to get up out of the chair without it, never mind walk into the other room. Well, fancy that. Swings and roundabouts, he thought. I might not be able to eat and have a chest and throat that feels like fire, but I've just bloody walked at least 50 steps without my stick. Like everyone, he always took his health for granted when he was younger. Running, walking, dancing weren't things to be grateful for, were they? That was until his motorbike crash. Everything changed then. His leg was damaged forever. The knee, useless. The leg was thinner, the muscles unused and wasted. There was minimal sensation and a general sense of numbness about it. Maurice was just thankful at the time that he hadn't lost it. Stephen sat in his bedroom on the end of his bed, playing on his games console. This was a collective Christmas present from about 5 years ago, and it was getting pretty outdated now. Being old had its advantages, as he could buy games cheaply, which made the fact he could not complete any game not hurt as much, at least not financially. This wasn't because he didn't want to, but because he had thick, clumsy fingers, and his hand-to-eye coordination was slow. This meant he got frustrated when he came to a tricky bit and got angry at the game and at himself. This usually ended up with him not playing for a while. He got mad about a lot of things, that he was made fun of at most places he went to, because of his slowness, that he could not play the baritone as well as the other baritone player, the fact that he lived with his brother at 29 years old. Most of all, it was because he wanted a girlfriend. He was lonely. Everyone he knew from school had someone. Some were married or even had children. When was it his turn? He hadn't felt like going to band tonight, which was very unusual. He never missed a night. They were his only friends, and he really enjoyed talking to Liz and a few of the others. Tonight, he couldn't face it, but not really knowing the reason why. He was distracted, floating from one thing to another. He had ventured out of his room to find his brother earlier, and to say he would have to give his excuses to Ban tonight. But Michael wasn't in. The car was missing. Stephen supposed he would be back soon to pick him up, and at that point he would tell him he wasn't going. Needing a distraction from the way he felt, Stephen started to play on the console. It did distract him. Playing for so long he lost track of time and did not realise that the time for band had long gone. He wasn't getting sick of it tonight. Stephen had never got such high scores before on this game. He was killing zombies left, right and centre. His fingers reacted to every impulse his brain sent. A stone-cold killer tonight. He started to laugh and laugh. Large guffaws, which got louder and louder. If there was anyone left in the house, they would have said it was maniacal. Keith felt that if people weren't committing crime on the streets, they were trying to hide it from him. He hadn't found anyone up to no good tonight, and that wasn't enough for him. It couldn't be that all people were law-abiding and some preparing to go to bed. He wanted, no needed, to get someone good and proper. Michael stood outside the band room amongst the trees. He didn't really need to camouflage himself, as there was no one outside or even due to come later. But if there were, they would never see him as he was, so far back in amongst the undergrowth. Norman stood beside him. They stood in silence for a while. Then Michael spoke. "What are we doing here, Norman?" "It is rude to question me, Michael, but I will forgive you as you are in training, and you have been chosen for other qualities. I am your teacher, and will make you into a fine predator. I am here to study my prey. I do not presume to know everything about them or their habits. And Michael, I can hear them. I hear their plans, and it will make it easier for me to snare them, yes?" He lifted his hand, palm upwards, and seemed to grab quickly at the air as he pronounced the word snare. "Oh yes, of course, I knew that. I feel I am already far greater than I was. A much better man. I feel king of the world already. You have made me what I always should have been, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also for giving me the lovely Kate, who I definitely feel is my soulmate." Michael, Norman laughed. "You are nowhere near what you will become. You are just a shadow of what you must be. But we will get there, will we not?" "Yes. Oh, yes. But I was wondering, when will I be like Kate and the others?" "When you are ready. Such a gift has to be earned, and I think you should be honoured to know that I have picked you amongst all others to be my special servant. You may see others get turned before you, but they will not be in the same class as yourself. I need you to be just the way you are at the moment. You still have Kate to keep you content for a while." "Ha ha, yes. Well, it's just us guys together. Wow, what that Kate can do. She does this little thing with it." Norman turned to him quickly and sharply said, "I do not wish to know." "I thought we were friends," Michael said in a whining voice, sounding rejected. "We are teacher and pupil, or master and servant, whichever you understand better. From this point forward, you refer to me only as the master." They stood in silence for a while. Michael's mind wandered on the thoughts of the lovely Kate, and whether he would see her again soon. "When I first met her, I thought I'd met her before. You know Kate?" "Yes, she is from somewhere not far from here. You may have met her before she turned." "Oh, right." Michael was quiet for a moment and then murmured, "You don't seem to be in as good a mood as you were the other night." "I am quite perplexed about a matter, Michael. The other night I started the process of ascending a small group of people towards what they will one day thank me for making them. Just a small group, you see, who will be part of my army. If I had made many subjects, well, it would be a lot of work for me to look after. So if I make a small amount, they can recruit others and look after their own. Plus, we need to leave some for our refreshments, yes. So the food that was specially made for the band had a special ingredient, and the wine that was supplied. I ate some of that food too. Yes, also you alone drank from my special vintage, which was in my office. Not only do you and the others have a special place in the world now, you also have, what you might say, a scent or marker on you that I can find anywhere, and nothing can wash it off or wash it out of you." "Fair enough," Michael said and shrugged his shoulders. "So why are you perplexed, then?" "Because I expected all of my protégés to be at home, as until I helped them along, they might feel unwell due to the marvellous changes beginning in their body, in their soul. But one is not at home. One is here, and I did not want that, a female. And I want to know why, and I am, how you say, cross about it." He seemed to be straining to hear, and had his head cocked to one side. He sniffed the air a lot, and sometimes opened his red lips, with his mouth wide. He would take in a gulp of air even though it was clear he did not breathe. He would then click his tongue on the roof of his mouth, like he was tasting something. He then came out of this sensory phase and turned to Michael. "I want to eat them, to look inside them, to immerse myself in their warm blood. It arouses me. I can do that every day soon, and I will, Michael." He shivered at the thought. It seemed almost orgasmic. "Us red-blooded males, eh? Women don't get it, do they?" Michael said. He had no idea of how intense this perversion was. Norman seemed to shake himself out of it. "However, we have work to be done, places to go, visits to make. You and I, Michael. The night is young. My confusion about this human can wait another day. They will not deter me from my path." Tonight, two people were being very naughty on the canal path. Nick Smith was up to quite a lot with his best friend's wife. It wasn't the first time either. They were only about 6 feet onto the path, and Claire was worried they would be seen. She stopped kissing Nick and pulled his hand out from under her dress. "Let's go a bit further, baby. We might get seen," she said. "We won't get seen. We might get heard, though. You get too carried away." "Oh, Nick. Oh, Nick," he mocked in a breathy girl's voice. "Cheeky," she laughed, and grabbed him by the hand and pulled him further down the path. They were so drunk. She leaned against the wall and put her arms around him, chewing his ear. "Harden for a long time tonight, baby?" she asked. "Your wish is my command." He bent her over the wall, and they were both soon groaning. They were hot and nearly fully clothed, and didn't feel the crisp November air. Even though it was pitch black, they both had their eyes closed in ecstasy. Keith removed his batter and tapped the wall with it. They both looked at him, definitely inebriated, and the woman giggled. "Shit," she said. "What are you looking at, pig?" grunted the man as he continued with what he was doing. "Are you jealous? You don't look like you get much. Just give me a few minutes and I'll be done. You won't put me off. Nothing does. I could probably even manage to give it to your wife after this one if you can't manage it." Keith's eyes flared, and he snarled through his teeth. "You have just made a grave mistake." He raised his baton. Keith narrowed his eyes, and he looked at the woman who was trying to pull up her underwear. "Run, now," he hissed at the woman, and she did. Maurice sat listening to the radio. The sounds of Strauss echoed through his house. He was considering trying out his legs again. There was an insatiable hunger in his stomach. He would kill for liver and onions, but knew he didn't have the ingredients, and wasn't prepared to test his legs enough to the shop and back. His mouth was watering, just thinking about it. On second thoughts, even though he fancied well, the onions would only add to his indigestion. By the time he had made it and eaten it, it would be time for bed. Then he would be trying to sleep on a full stomach. No, it was a silly idea. His doorbell rang. Looking at the clock on the mantelpiece, it was now 8:45 p.m. Very unusual to get callers at this time. Maybe it was Mrs. Williams next door, having a funny turn and needing his help. He got up slowly out of his chair. Carefully, but without his stick, using the walls for balance, he made his way to the front door. When he opened it, he was faced with two people. One man he knew well, and one man he had only met once. Both were smiling. "Come in," he said.